Our objective through the Ships for America Act is to build 250 ocean-going vessels over the next 10 years. It's ambitious but achievable, industry tells us. And if we train that workforce and invest in those shipyards, it will give us the capacity during time of war to repair our vessels or to build new vessels. So this is at once a national and economic security play, but also a real economic opportunity for Hoosiers and others across the country.
Welcome back to Innovate or Evaporate, where we explore the relentless pace of change and the innovators who drive it. I'm your host, Toph. If you think innovation is just for Silicon Valley startups or boardroom executives, you're looking at the map all wrong. The biggest battle for the future of technology, AI, and global security is being fought on the floor of the United States Senate. And today, we are talking to the architect of that battle plan. We are joined by a man who has made it his personal mission to ensure the United States doesn't just compete, but dominates the 21st century. He is a United States Senator for Indiana, a former Marine Corps intelligence officer, and the primary architect behind one of the most significant pieces of legislation in modern history, the $280 billion CHIPS and Science Act. He is reshaping the American heartland into a global tech hub, leading the charge on artificial intelligence policy, literally rewriting the playbook on how we outcompete China. He's going to tell us why we need to build ships here in America again, and how Indiana is becoming the pilot seat for the nation's drone economy. Senator Todd Young, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me on.
This is going to be an absolute blast.
Yeah.
So I would love to start off today with a little bit of background and foundation for your professional career that leads us to today. So you were in management consulting, right,
Yes.
for Crowe
Yes.
Business, Marine Corps intelligence officer. You went to London, studied agriculture, did a thesis on Midwestern agriculture. That plays right into this whole concept of like cross-sector, disparate stakeholders, all these, bring these things together
Yes.
to accomplish things. How did that impact how you think today?
Quite a bit. Quite a bit. I'm not only a lifelong learner. I'm just somebody by nature really intellectually curious, and I have a habit of throwing myself into unfamiliar situations, sometimes uncomfortable situations, just so I can learn a lot more
Yep.
about things. And so, to some extent, I did that in the military. Didn't really come from a military background. My parents weren't in the military. I wasn't encouraged to be in the military. I did that as it relates to the economics education, first at the University of Chicago and then um, overseas in London. Really, just wanting to learn. Not sure how I was going to use the education, but having some measure of faith that down the road I might be able to bring it into battle, and as so to speak. And really that led me to public life as well. I mean, I was interested in government and had a heart for service, which the Marine Corps helped cultivate. But I first worked for Senator Lugar for a period of time, U.S. Senator for Indiana some years ago, and then ultimately ran for office, never having worked on a campaign really, and understanding how campaigns work. So
What was that
um,
first office you ran for?
it was for the U.S. House of
Okay.
Representatives, which is not typically the sort of office that people start off on, certainly not without a knowledge of how to run campaigns.
You're like, let's
But
just go big.
yeah, I went big, and, like many entrepreneurs, I suppose, sometimes what you don't know can be helpful to you
Right.
because, right,
It's so true.
had I sat down rationally and thought about that path, it would have seemed a little off. But no, I've been blessed, and we're all blessed to live in a country where you can have these different types of experiences, and I have figured out ways to draw from them. So, the military experience, I draw on it on a regular basis in many ways, but among them, most obviously, is just the national security exposure. So that's something that's very helpful to me in my current job. My interest in reading about history, including economic history, informs my work on issues like tech policy and the Chips and Science Act, which I expect get into.
Yep.
But all these things, I think, if you really try and contextualize what you learned, that is, figure out what lessons are to be drawn from your experiences and readings and conversations with people, I think we can figure out how to use this information that we acquire from all sorts of different sources. And I think I've done that in my career. Yeah.
When did you join the Marine Corps? Was it after college?
Yeah, it was right upon graduation from the
Mhm.
U.S. Naval Academy in 1995, and I served 5 years on active duty.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. And then when you get in the military, so you went this intelligence officer route.
Yes.
Is that planned, or do they tap different people based on skill sets? How does your path in the military,
Yeah,
how does that come to?
it's typically a combination of what your interests are and your aptitudes, right?
Yeah,
And in my case, drone technology was something most people never heard of. And back in 1995,
right.
it was not understood, even within the military, how drones are going to be used for modern warfare. In fact, we're just starting to apply the lessons that we started to tease out back in the 1990s. I was actively involved in that effort. Very entrepreneurial in some ways to figure out how to take this new technology that many generals and admirals intuited would be very important to the future of warfare, and trying to integrate it into our combined arms operations in the Marine Corps.
So one thing that I think is interesting in living here in Indiana, we go back to President Eisenhower, right, was one of the first to kind of recognize the importance for security and safety and having industrialization, technology, like those capabilities on the interior of the country and not just in major hubs on the coast. And a lot of the work that you're doing is doing exactly that, right? Bringing technology in. How do you think about like those regional bets and the importance
Yeah.
of making sure we have these centers of excellence and hubs in the interior of the country?
Yeah, well, I think it's important for starters to have kind of broadly distributed opportunity all across the country, right? We don't want our investments just to occur on the coast. We want just to occur next to existing hubs and locuses of innovation and economic activity. We want kids and adults across the heartland to dream big,
Yeah.
to believe that their dreams can be rewarded if they work hard in pursuit of them. And we don't want people to dream of fleeing the industrial Midwest. It's a great place to live. We want everyone to benefit from the striving that occurs in every part of the country. So I think that's important, but it's a little more than that. There are regional economies. So it's one of the real advantages that we have strategically vis-a-vis other countries is we have all kinds of different regional economies and very low barriers to trade within North America itself. And we need to harness our regional talent, our expertise in, say, manufacturing or logistics or ag bioscience here in Indiana, and that workforce and the assets associated with that workforce, private companies, actual infrastructure that supports that mission, and then we need to nurture that from a public standpoint on a regular basis. So there are certain things that the private sector will invest in and take care of because it earns a profit to an individual investor or firm. There are other broader kind of spillover benefits that benefit the entire population. That's where government comes in, working with nonprofits and the private sector and universities and other stakeholders to make sure that we're tending to those longer term investments as well.
So let's start off with the CHIPS Act.
Yes.
So you were one of the major architects of that, or maybe the architect that was initiating all of that. So can you take us back to when did those conversations start, and how the formation work, and how'd you gain bipartisan support for that initiative? This is a major initiative.
Yeah. These conversations started a number of years ago when a lot of thought leaders were taking a look at our supply chains and our resiliency as a country and publicly expressing concern that maybe we were becoming overly dependent,
Mhm.
hollowed out as it relates to the ability to manufacture certain critical components. And um, manufacture of semiconductors sort of led the way in this area of concern because it's a platform technology. I mean, it's essential to run a modern economy, from our cell phones to our radar systems and nuclear missile submarines. They all depend on workable semiconductors. And increasingly, we found ourselves dependent on uh, uh, either our primary adversary, China, or countries that are right outside the perimeter of China.
Right.
South Korea, the Taiwanese, maybe to a lesser extent, the Japanese, all of whom have expertise in manufacturing components of semiconductors. There was a need, a recognition generally to that we needed to de-risk out of China because they don't typically play by the rules or can't be depended on to play by the rules
Right.
during difficult times, and to work with other friendly countries and get some measure of independence as relates to mission critical components. And so that conversation evolved, and then right around the time that I was elected to the U.S. Senate, 2016, was sworn into office in 2017, I started to work on this. Congress did act. We officially authorized what ultimately became the CHIPS Act, the semiconductor provisions in a national defense bill years ago. I always remind people who still today oppose this legislation that they once voted for it, right? They just didn't vote for the money to go behind it. And that's really what the CHIPS and Science Act brought to bear. It brought to bear a bit of an incentive to reshore certain productive capacity and to give a little bit of money to our diplomats and other stakeholders in government to work with friendly governments
Yeah.
as we figured out how to build redundancies in our supply chain and reshore our capabilities.
So that started in 2017 when you started to really work on this act. Did COVID, because that was at what, 2020
Yes.
timeframe?
Yeah.
Did COVID really help to crystallize and shine a spotlight like we our pharmaceutical ingredients,
Yes.
right? Chips, rare earth materials. Did that help to like shine a spotlight on the critical nature of like being able
It
to
did all across America.
yeah,
The only place that that spotlight didn't seem to be felt was in the corridors of Washington D.C. And among some kind of libertarian absolutists
yep.
who insisted, even amidst a global pandemic, that we should just allow the market to work.
Mhm.
Well, um, they overlook the fact that there is such a phenomenon as a market failure,
Right.
right? When you have other countries subsidizing their semiconductor production, right,
Yep.
and changing the cost structure for production of semiconductors, we needed to also bake in a national security and economic security premium to manufacturing some of our own components,
Right.
right?
Right.
And so that sort of analysis, albeit uncomfortable for market-friendly people, myself included, was stubbornly resisted by a number of people in Washington. But we broke through it. We broke through it through a lot of argumentation, a fair amount of coalition building. And I would say that the pandemic really crystallized everything, though. It made incredibly concrete to people why the auto plant in Fort Wayne, Indiana was idling
Right.
dozens of times, right? They couldn't get their hands on enough semiconductors. We were hearing from our constituents who were going to Walmart during the pandemic and they couldn't find consumer electronics on the shelves.
Yep.
Well, there weren't enough semiconductors. So a modern economy clearly depended on access to these. And then most of us have some sort of military presence in our states. I travel 45 minutes from my house down to Crane Naval Base in southern Indiana and hear from them that they literally could not continue to produce the hardware that our warfighters depend on
Right.
in situations. So this is becoming an issue of military deterrence since our adversaries knew that we had shortages of this mission critical equipment. So the atmosphere of the global pandemic revealing the market failure combined with our efforts to pull together a coalition and make the argument that we had to do this for the good of the American people
Is it
led to
still
its conclusion.
is this still a $280 billion act? Has that number shifted?
Yeah, so it's actually in terms of the manufacturing incentives, it's roughly $40 billion in manufacturing incentives
Okay.
to get sufficient reshore capacity. Most of the money that you've cited, that's authorized money for research and development purposes
Okay.
across a number of tech areas.
And is that for like one of those hubs that we were awarded here in Indiana?
The
Is
hub
that correct?
money was very modest.
Okay.
Yeah. The vast majority is for fundamental excuse me, upstream research.
Okay.
So fundamental discovery around things like material science, quantum,
Yep.
AI, biotech, and that money has not been authorized. But you think about the return on investment for this $40 billion in semiconductor portion, for
Yeah.
example. Um, we spent $40 billion of taxpayer money, a lot of money, right? Especially in a time of constrained resources. But we've gotten $500 billion in private sector commitments as a result of that. That's a pretty good ROI for any public program.
It's helping to de-risk, right? Others then activate that private capital
Absolutely.
to come in and activate this much needed capability.
Correct. Reducing single points of failure so that we're now working with
Right.
trusted allies and partners in developing, as importantly, our own productive capacity so that we can't be economically coerced by our adversaries who might threaten to interrupt these supply chains at any moment in the future.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How far are we into this journey? Are we kind of on schedule when you think about activating the manufacturing capabilities and the investments coming in? Are we kind of at the desired trajectory? Are we behind it? Are we ahead of it?
Right where I wanted to be. I mean, we've had the announcements.
Yep.
We continue to stay, on schedule in terms of various groundbreakings and what have you. There are things that I wish we could change. They happen to have existed before the CHIPS Act passed.
Yep.
For example, permitting.
Yep.
I wish permitting could be a lot more streamlined and expedited.
Yep.
I actually negotiated some legislation to streamline our permitting process for fabs, these semiconductor fabrication facilities. But we really need permitting reform more broadly in this country. I wish we could go further on the fab permitting. Workforce development is going to be the real, you might say, implementation risk on this legislation. Legislating is not a fire and forget exercise, and the Chips and Science Act is very well constructed and well conceived, but it's going to be private sector actors, it's going to be the Trump administration, the one that succeeds the Trump administration, our universities, and others who will be charged with actually taking these tools and making sure that it works over the years. There's no doubt in my mind that Hoosier workers and American workers more broadly know how to make semiconductors. They're going to figure this out, right? But the real risk will be things like workforce training. Who's in charge of those programs? Ivy Tech and Purdue are sort of leading the way right now. So Indiana's doing its part, but these sorts of efforts will need to be replicated across the country. And our administration's going to have to maintain focus, too, to make sure they continue the good work that preceded them.
So along with this comes the rare earth mineral concept,
Yes.
right? And so to make these chips, we have to have access to rare earth materials. And I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there's been some discussions maybe with Ukraine and even having access to some of their rare earth, maybe other countries, and then here at home, being able to mine rare earth materials. Where does that kind of shape up in the trajectory of the ability to manufacture chips and then accessibility of the rare
Well,
earth
it's a great
minerals?
question because you really do need to look upstream,
Yep.
right? You are, in essence, dependent on other countries to source the inputs to these semiconductors. If you're not developing redundancies in those supply chains as well, which is why I've encouraged this current administration to not only work on permitting reform domestically, to come up with long-term contracts for new mines that may be developed in this country. That'll take some time, but we need to provide certainty to these mines that are dug in this country to extract minerals. Um, Otherwise, no one will ever dig a mine. The Chinese will run the same playbook they always do, which is to undercut the price.
Right.
So we need to do that, but we also need to recognize that so much of the capacity, either we don't have the minerals here in the United States, certain minerals, or we certainly don't have the processing capacity, and the Chinese outflanked us over the course of a couple of decades, and they've got most of the rare earth processing capacity. So that's a piece that has to be figured out. I've offered some solutions towards that challenge. I know the administration is working to negotiate some of these
Hmm.
agreements, but in order to provide, I think, longer term certainty, narrow free trade agreements just focused on minerals will need to be established and then sanctioned by Congress, so that when the administration changes to another party at some point in the future, there's not questions about the viability of these agreements. So, I've given the president these types of authorizations through a piece of legislation, but we're going to need Congress to pass it and for the president to sign it into law to provide long-term certainty about rare earths and other critical inputs.
So let's move into shipbuilding,
Yes,
and then we'll go to drones.
of course.
So we stopped making ships. That's kind of a drastic statement, but in essence, like
Basically, you're right.
we stopped making ships. And so just like it's the ability to manufacture, widgets, like just say widgets,
Yeah.
semiconductors, and all kinds of things, and protect our steel industry, like all these things are so critical.
Yes.
And so our shipbuilding capacity has diminished to near zero.
Yes.
And I know that's another big push, right?
What
Is it
is?
is the ability
Yes.
to build ships, and there's discussions about what we might do here in Indiana. And by the way, a lot of people forget or don't realize Indiana is bordered by more water than it is land. And we have 3 premier inland ports here. And so our ability to be a significant player with something like shipbuilding is massive.
Yeah, it's I come back here and understandably, our neighbors don't follow all these things. They hire some of us to follow these things on their behalf. And when I tell them that we don't have much shipbuilding capacity in this country, they say, "What have you guys been doing? What's been happening in Washington?" It's a fair question.
Yeah.
We took our eye off the ball, and why do I diagnose we took our eye off the ball? Well, we all believe in markets. Markets are wonderful. I tout the importance of markets and respecting market forces and the elegance of markets on a daily basis. But we also need to understand that when other countries step outside of market rules,
Mhm.
sometimes we need to protect our own interests, including our economic and national security. And in this case, other countries recognized that they needed some shipbuilding capacity for reasons of economic and national security. The Japanese, the South Koreans in particular, have been subsidizing their shipbuilding capacities over the years, so they took much of our business. And then the Chinese began to take their business for the same reasons, right?
Yep.
And so, really over a generation or so, we lost the ability to build ships. We didn't train the workforce, we didn't invest in the shipyards. So today, we can very slowly build naval ships. Um, we need to build them much faster. We need to build more of them. And we also need to build merchant vessels. We
Yep.
built one merchant vessel in the United States last year. One.
Wow.
One ocean going, cargo carrying ocean vessel, which is how most of our trade moves to and fro,
Right.
right? And so our objective through the Ships for America Act is to build 250 ocean-going vessels over the next 10 years. It's ambitious but achievable, industry tells us. And if we train that workforce and invest in those shipyards, it will give us the capacity during time of war to repair our vessels
Yes.
or to build new vessels, bringing into production some of that merchant vessel capacity we've invested in. So this is at once a national and economic security play, but also a real economic opportunity, as you've alluded to, for Hoosiers and others across the country. Uh, Workforces around our existing shipyards on the coasts, where they're making mostly naval vessels, they have very tight labor supplies. So to bring in production other areas, brand new shipyards, or to significantly expand existing shipyards, maybe like those in Indiana, will be important. We have one shipyard. It's on the Ohio River, the Corn Island Shipyard. I've been down and visited. They make a number of barge platforms right now. They've expressed some interest, as have neighboring communities, really gearing up to participate in this very important project. And then there's been some interest. The state would have to embrace this
Mhm.
effort, but there's been some interest by large shipbuilding companies to locate along Lake Michigan, right next to
Right.
one of our steel mills.
Right.
So that could be a sort of a region play, so to speak. Regardless, there will be ample opportunity for Hoosiers to make more steel, maritime components to larger vessels, and some of the largest engines that are currently manufactured by Cummins, for example, go into these vessels. They can make a lot more of them, employing more Hoosiers. So there will be plenty of work for those who want to participate.
I love it. I mean, we're number one in advanced manufacturing jobs, right? Because
Yes,
here in
that's
Indiana.
right.
So talent, water, the cross sector of these industries you just mentioned, right? Steel and technology and building the ships.
And and
It's
and I think there's another dimension to it that really motivates me. You know, during this time when people are questioning whether different institutions work, and there's a fair amount of cynicism, and a large segment of our population in different ways feels disrespected or left behind. Let's give people across the heartland an opportunity to meaningfully participate in this project, like to make another American century in the 21st century, to work with their hands, to make some things that are critical to our national and economic security. That really excites me, and I think could inspire a lot of our workforce.
I love that. Let's move into drones. So big announcement recently with
Yes,
Indiana being a national test site for drones. If I have that roughly correct, can we
you do.
talk a little bit about that?
Well, credit Brian Bedford. He's the head of our FAA. Brian was CEO for a number of years at Republic Airways out of Carmel, Indiana. Brian and I were friends over the years. And when he came in after President Trump said, "I want you to lead my Federal Aviation Administration," Brian naturally approached me and told me how he was concerned about airline safety and all the things you'd want your FAA administrator concerned about. I said, "Brian, we're going to focus on that. But after that is going to be drones, because there was some legislation passed a number of years ago. I knew from my time in the U.S. House that designated different centers of excellence, drone test sites across the country. Indiana participated but did not receive a designation a number of years ago. And I told Brian that there were some additional spots under federal law, two more, that could be picked, and I thought they should open it up for bidding, because in the interim, we've seen the drone economy take off. We've seen drones become a lot more important in warfare, and Brian agreed. And so we began putting together a package, and we agreed that Indiana, being a manufacturing state, we should tease out how doing more drone training at the test site, which will run incidentally from roughly Atterbury, south of Indianapolis,
Yep.
up to Purdue University, probably over to Crane Naval Base. But how that training exercise should be complemented by manufacturing capability. So you would actually have, the vision would be drone companies starting here or relocating here, so they can iteratively improve their drone designs and manufacture them, basically in the same site. And so we started to partner with the governor's office, and we were selected just back in December.
Yep.
And so I think this will ultimately lead to more drone companies locating here. In fact, the Indiana Economic Development Corporation's already hearing from drone companies about their interest in choosing Indiana, which is really exciting.
It's extremely exciting. You think about going, are we the only state that has a naval base that does not own water? Is that true?
Well, the only sizable one.
Sizable
Yeah,
one,
yeah,
which I find that fascinating.
yeah.
So there's a lot of talk about like a defense tech corridor, right? That kind of starts down at Crane and
Yes,
kind of comes up through Bloomington, Indy, through West Lafayette, Purdue, all the way up to Northwest Indiana, on into Chicago, up to Green Bay.
yeah,
And then you have a lot of things happening in Fort Wayne. You think about that corridor, coming across that corridor coming across the state,
yes.
and intersecting. What unique advantages do you think Indiana has when we think about the CHIPS Act and shipbuilding and drones?
It's I've asked myself this question a lot over the years so that I could make a pitch for Indiana and different things, and it's almost too much to mention. But let me just throw some things out that we're really good at:
Yeah.
materials science,
Yep.
ag bioscience,
Yep.
quantum, at least at Purdue, and we got some expertise down at Indiana University. Lily's getting involved, and you got the assets up in Chicago.
Yep.
Um, we mentioned the drone economy, semiconductor training at Purdue University, which is how we landed a multi-billion-dollar facility fab at SK Hynix at West Lafayette. So those are examples of some of the cutting edge manufacturing capabilities we have. And of course, there's a lot more than that. But if we could cluster together some of this talent and brand it as a manufacturing corridor, I think it makes a lot of sense. The
Yep.
coasts are known as software locuses of expertise and innovation. They'll continue to be known for that. So let's play to our strengths. Hard
Like,
tech.
I love that hard
Yeah,
tech.
yeah,
It's like this reconvergence, right? Go back to the industrial. Actually, we go back to the agricultural revolution. Took centuries,
yeah.
right? And we had this industrial revolution is kind of decades, and then the digital revolution is kind of years. And now today, with AI, et cetera, and the impact on all of those industries, it feels like it's every single day something's changing. But back to the hard tech, the ability to transform. I just like to use this term, like building widgets. Now it could be a ship or
Yes.
or a chip or whatever, but the ability to build widgets and integrate, right, the latest in technology is something that's either kind of in the DNA of a geographic region or not. And I think we have some real special sauce. Going back to automobile manufacturing and all of the things that we have.
Well, the
Uh,
timing's right too,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Culturally, you sense people are getting really excited about building things.
yeah,
Whether it's the focus on Elon Musk and some of his activities, or just right here in Indiana. I think people are excited about building things and building really high value, interesting things
yeah,
that are necessary for our national security. And then you combine that with President Trump's emphasis on giving people across you know, uh, Midwestern America opportunities, the left behind communities. He's tapped into that and the need to undergo a manufacturing renaissance. So if we can really ride this tide and frankly be a little less reserved, a little less humble as Hoosiers about our strengths and start selling
yeah.
these attributes, I think we have an opportunity to really land some great opportunities. Yeah.
We're getting close to the end here, but I love that. A lot of people don't realize that if we go with a different kind of an ecosystem, which is around healthcare, right? So we have the number one valued pharma company, we have the number one pure play ag company, the number two animal health company, the
Yes.
number one healthcare system. And it's like the convergence, right? And those are all within a 10-mile
Yes.
radius of where we're sitting right now.
And we're actually entering with the convergence of artificial intelligence and emerging biotech. We're soon going to be able to engineer with precision
Yep.
new living things and embed new traits that we see in nature in those living things. It almost blows your mind. And to manufacture those things, we could do that here in Indiana too. So how do you manufacture biological biotech things? Well, you grow them in tanks. You grow them in tanks, and the feedstock tends to be ag feedstock. So you can imagine distributed manufacturing in rural Indiana or across rural America more broadly, making these incredible new inventions, and the economics will work. Yes, our labor costs are higher than other countries, but if you're making close to the end user these high value added things, the economics work. So we could be undergoing a manufacturing renaissance as we speak with the convergence of biotech and traditional manufacturing. McKinsey indicates that today 70% of the things that are made through conventional manufacturing means can be made through biomanufacturing, grown in tanks. Now, we just need to get those things made more predictably, at scale, and at lower costs. That will happen. So here again, Indiana's poised to be out on the leading edge of this biomanufacturing revolution, and companies like Lilly and Elanco and Corteva, they're very much aware of this.
I'm dreaming about the day when they all work together and they
Me too.
develop a capsule that goes in their bodies and it cruises around just looking for the bad cells and just zaps them.
So
We
I'm
get rid of cancer, we get rid of all that
I,
stuff.
I'm dreaming of that too, especially since you mentioned it. But I'm also dreaming of the day where the Lillies, the Cortevas, and the Elancos say, "How can we take our biotech expertise
Mhm.
and not just make drugs, or not just make animal drugs, or not just make new seeds, but figure out how to parlay that expertise into bioindustrial
Yes.
applications? Because our war fighters need those. They'll be the first customer,
Yep.
right? As the federal government often is,
Yep.
and then other consumer markets will follow. The Chinese have strategically looked at these opportunities, and they're making heavy investments. We have a different system. We shouldn't try and adopt theirs, but I do think that they can be a barometer for what is possible and
Yep.
where we should be giving due attention for national security reasons. Indiana can lead the way.
I love it. Have we not are there any major topics that you want to cover today that we haven't covered?
You know, oftentimes I'm asked about how things work in Congress and why it is that I work with people across the aisle to try and get things done.
Yeah.
And I think it's just important to get on record that in order to really legislate, in order to solve problems through the legislative process in Washington, you need 60 votes. You need 60 votes. So neither now nor any time in the near future will we see either party be able to secure 60 votes in the U.S. Senate. So part of the reason I work with colleagues is because I want to solve problems and
Right.
make principled compromises to solve big problems. I also think I think it's a skill, and it's not easy in today's day and age to make these sort of principled compromises and to push things along, and they don't always receive as much attention as other things. But that's another dimension to it. Is I just feel like my skills lend themselves to working with others to kind of come up with solutions to shared concerns.
Yeah. I love that. The several years ago, maybe 5 years ago ish, Indiana was ranked as the number one regulatory environment. And I think at the time, and I think it's still roughly correct actually, like 94% of our legislation is passed in a bipartisan fashion. So back to the humble Hoosiers
Yes.
and the friendly Hoosier thing, like there is something in the water here where like people are in general humble and nice and want to work with each other. And
Check the ego at the door. Let's just figure out how to
there
do it.
was that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I think there is a real thirst for gosh, how can we get back to at the federal level, like let's just work together. How can we check those egos at the door? And because we have a lot of work to do
Yeah.
as a country and in serving the population and with folks like yourself, we'll get there one way or
Thanks.
another. We're gonna get there. So
Thanks, Tough.
all right, so we have a few rapid fire
Yeah, sure.
questions. So kind of on what the topic we were just on, the first rapid fire question is what is one thing in your industry that you think people should stop doing?
I think they should stop focusing on motives And what's your motive for adopting that position, and instead focus more on solutions, and how we can work together. There's, yeah, a lot of
That
questioning of motives.
I love that. That's a big one.
We burn a lot of energy.
Yeah, I love that. What is one thing or a process or a habit that you think leads to our best ability to like disrupt ourselves and innovate for improvement?
Regardless of your industry, I think it's really good to study peers in your industry, maybe even competitors. So let's see what they're doing. I marvel at it. In Washington, oftentimes we'll wrestle with, say, a workforce development challenge. Have we looked at what the Swiss are doing? Is there another country? Have the Singaporeans dealt with this workforce challenge? And we could save a lot of time and maybe a lot of money if we just looked at best practices elsewhere and tried to adapt them to ourselves.
Yeah, I think it's really
Yeah.
strong. I love that. Every previous business I've ever started and had and sold, etc., we always looked outward and look at the best practices. To your point, and you grab these little nuggets.
That's right.
And you developed something else that
So
becomes a
this is where we started, like
Yeah.
my life experiences.
Yes.
I don't pretend to be the smartest guy in the world, but I do draw a lot from my observations and my experiences and my relationships and my readings, and I really try and apply them.
Yep.
And so I think it comes down to focus to some extent,
I like
and also a certain amount of respect that others are smart too,
Right.
and that they've tried some of your solutions before and maybe discarded them for whatever reason. So yeah,
I think that literally applies to anybody in the world. Doesn't matter the president, the prime minister of any given country, etc. Any of us should always aspire to not be the smartest person in the room. Because if we're not, that means we're getting the best ideas out there and we're collaborating and partnering.
no, I've listened. I've made my career about hiring people smarter than me in particular areas and compensating for areas that I wish I were better in. So I think that's kind of the art of management or leadership is knowing yourself and then building a proper team around it.
It's like the more we learn, the less we know.
That's right. Absolutely. Yeah.
All right. So last question is, if you could solve one thing in the world, wave a magic wand. If you could solve one thing in the world with innovation, what would it be?
We spend a lot of time, especially now that I'm on the Intel committee,
Hmm.
focusing on dual use technologies. And you just gave me an opportunity to solve one thing with innovation, and that would be to come up with a way to allow us to harness these new tools of biotech or artificial intelligence or quantum technologies for good while locking out nefarious uses. So if you could come up with a tool to make that happen, I'm all in.
All right.
Pay a lot of money for that.
Entrepreneurs out there, you heard it right here. So let's
Yeah.
get some entrepreneurs to go solve that. That's awesome. Senator Young, this has been absolutely amazing. I've learned a ton spending time with you and learning more about the CHIPS Act and drones and shipbuilding. Thank you for all the work that you do on behalf of all your constituents. We know you put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into it. So thank you very much.
Well, it's my privilege. Thanks for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
All right. Thank you, Senator. Appreciate it. All right. Until next time, we'll see you soon on Innovate or Evaporate.